Okay, well, it's 5 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this month's Science Cafe from the MDI Biological Laboratory. I'm Fred Bever. Some of you who are joining us who've been at previous Science Cafes are probably used to being hosted by Jerry Bowers, our development director. She is here amongst us, and so she will no doubt be helpful as we proceed through this. I am the new communications director, officially the chief communications officer for MDI Bio Lab, and very happy to be here and starting to get involved with public events such as this one, which we're titling Building Maine's Life Sciences Workforce. And it's trying to take a look at some of the momentum and resources and intelligences that are being brought to bear on this question of how we can have a successful bioscience economy in Maine, what it needs, what it wants, how can we get there with the resources that we have. Joining us today is Aileen Huang-Saad. She's at Northeastern University's Roux Institute. She's the director of Life Sciences and Biosciences. Is that correct, Aileen? Life Sciences and Engineering.
Health and Engineering, yep.
Okay, got it. Also with us is MDI Biological Laboratories' Owen James Coffman. He's a scientist here, and he directs the Maine INBRE network, which is an educational resource that he'll tell us more about in a minute. And Billie Cary, she's with the Bioscience Association of Maine. She manages their education programs. And now I'd just like to ask each of our guests to introduce themselves. People who are joining us from points all over the place electronically, please feel free to put questions in chat or raise your hand. I think for the first 20 minutes or 30 minutes, we'll sort of try to keep things moving with our panelists, but eventually hope to be able to open it up. I think we'll have guests from hopefully various elements of the bioscience and life science economy in the state, particularly be interested since we've got some scientists, administrators, and educators as part of the panel. From the nonprofit side, if you're from the commercial sector or if you're a student, please let us know in your chat question or however you can, because we certainly would like to hear from some other groups as well. There are other components of this whole life sciences universe. So Jim, maybe we could start with you. Tell us a little bit about what your work is and both as a scientist, but also in terms of educational resources in the state.
Yeah, so I'm Jim Coffman. I'm an associate professor here at the MDI Biological Laboratory. I've been here since 2005. I'm a developmental biologist, which means my research is focused on the process of development, how we all come to be. My laboratory uses zebrafish as a model organism to understand development, and we're really focused on health effects, long-term health effects of early life stress. So I run a NIH-funded research lab looking at that question, but I'm also more pertinent to this discussion. I'm the director of a large NIH program grant called the Maine INBRE, which is shown on this slide, and it's a grant that funds a network of biomedical research and educational institutions. So MDI Biological Laboratory is a lead institution in this network, but we also have a number of colleges and the University of Maine, University of New England are partner institutions. And the Maine INBRE funds both research at these partner institutions and also training programs for students. And one of the big objectives of these INBREs, and there are 23 across the country, is to engage undergraduate students in cutting-edge research to prepare them for working in research-related fields, biomedical research-related fields.
And Jim, how long has this network been going on? Has it reached sort of maturation, a robust place? What's its future?
Yeah, it's been around for 20 years, and it goes through multiple funding cycles. We're in the fourth year now, getting ready to start the fifth and final year of the current funding cycle. So I think this is the fourth cycle. We're going to be submitting a renewal application for the next cycle, which would start in 2024. So it's grown quite a bit since it started. Right now, we've got 14 institutions, and you can see them in the map there. In the network, it started out about half that many, I think, when it started in 2002 or so. So it was started out. My predecessor program director was Patricia Hand, who retired from MDIBL a few years ago, and then I took it over from her in 2016. And we added one institution in the last cycle. We're adding another institution in the next one, University of Maine, Augusta, which is not shown on the map. So it's grown quite a bit. And, in addition to the growth of adding additional institutions, we're really, one of the things that's developing is interconnections and collaborations between the institutions, which is one of the big goals of the project.
Great, thank you very much, Jim. And now, Aileen Huang-Saad, you're something of a newcomer to the States. Is that fair? Tell us about what you've been up to.
Totally fair. Thanks so much for the introduction and also including me in this great opportunity to talk to everyone. You are correct. I am from away. But I'm so excited to be here in Maine. As you mentioned, I'm the Director of Life Sciences, Health and Engineering here at the Roux Institute. And for people who may not know the Roux Institute is one of the network campuses of Northeastern University. So most people may be more familiar with Northeastern from our Boston campus. But over the last several years, Northeastern has established what we call a global university network, in that we have now 14 campuses around the world, where we're really trying to give our students opportunities to engage in contextual education and experiential learning around the world. And so the Roux Institute was the 9th network campus to come about, and we were very unique in a couple respects, one of which is we are one of the few campuses that actually probably the only campus that has a economic development mission where we are committed to impacting the Maine state economy. We also were the first network campus to really think about education in terms of more than educational extension. And so what does that mean? That means we have 3 or 4 pillars, depending on who you speak to or how it's presented. One of which is we know higher education is critical to learning, but we also have incorporated research where we are bringing research depth to our institution here in the Portland campus. The third is we believe in entrepreneurship, where we want to be able to provide our technologists and scientists opportunities to translate their work into practice. And then finally, we do this all in partnership. So we work very closely with entities throughout the state and around the country to really be able to make sure that we're providing our students the best possible opportunities. I was personally drawn to the Roux, where I spent actually, prior to coming to the Roux, I was at University of Michigan in the Department of Biomedical Engineering for 14 years. And the Roux Institute was an opportunity to really bring together things that I've been working on throughout my career, which is I'm a biomedical engineering scientist by trade. I spent 10 years in industry working from large contract research organizations all the way to venture capitalists, and then ended up transitioning to University of Michigan, where I saw that there was a significant gap between professional practice and education. And I felt that we need to do better for our students if we really want to be successful. And all of those opportunities came about by being able to come to the Roux. So that's a little bit about who I am and what we're doing. And we can talk more about some of the specific initiatives when we get into the general discussion.
That's great. Thanks very, very much, Aileen. And finally, with us is Billie Cary. She's the Education Programs Director for the Bioscience Association of Maine, which recently produced a terrific report on the economic impact of the life sciences economy, particularly private sector. Billie, could you tell us a little bit about what you do with the association, maybe a little bit what the association does, and then maybe you could describe a little bit about these factoids that we're seeing from your economic impact report.
Sure. So I'll start with myself. So I'm Billie Cary. I'm the Education Programs Manager at the Bioscience Association of Maine, or BioME. Our mission is to advance economic growth and opportunities in the life sciences community of Maine. We do this through advocacy, education, economic development, workforce development, and out-of-state business attraction. My focus within our organization is on education and workforce. So these are intrinsically linked, as we believe that strengthening Maine's workforce begins by providing and connecting students with STEM opportunities. Another thing that I've been working on recently is collecting data for the Biennial Coalition of State Bioscience Institutes National Workforce Trends Report, which strives to identify the most pressing talent needs of the life sciences industry. So this report's going to be completed in June, and it's meant to inform industry employers who are making strategic business decisions about finding and developing talent, academic institutions who are preparing the next generation of talent, legislators who administer workforce training and research dollars, and economic and workforce development organizations seeking to attract and support businesses in their region. So stay tuned for that one. But this report that Fred has pulled up, this graphic is taken from our 2022 State of the Industry report, which we produce every other year. So just some background on it. There are about 500 different companies included in this report, which accounts for the 9,500 jobs on this slide. Our industry has been consistently and rapidly growing for the past 10 years. As you can see on the next dot there, the $108,000 average annual income for the life sciences industry is much higher than average for other industries in Maine. It does not only represent the postdocs and Ph.D. scientists in the state, but also manufacturing jobs within the life sciences industry. The $2.2 billion of Maine's gross regional product, so through New England, again, is pretty high. And then that last number, the 4.2% of Maine's total exports, means everything that Maine creates and then sends to foreign countries. 4.2% of it is life sciences related. So how we think of the bioscience economy, at BioME, we believe that the industry will grow and continue to create more jobs. And again, this assumption is based on a 10-year trend, as well as global trends in the life sciences industry. Definitely going to see more startups and hopefully more major companies coming to our state as well. However, one caveat is that other states are also growing their bioscience sectors, so we need to stay competitive. And then I'll let you.
So Billie, you did your group just hold an expo in Portland last week. We were there. Many of the people who are participating in today's forum were. What was the point of that? How did it go? This is the first time out for this sort of thing. It was like a career fair, but not quite.
Yeah, so this was meant to introduce students and industry to each other. So it was really focused on the students that are interested in life sciences, be they late high school who are thinking about colleges, thinking about their next steps, all the way up through PhD students who are interested in the companies that are in our state and doing life sciences work. We find that many people think that after college, after school, they have to go down to Boston in order to have a science career. And so we wanted to introduce them to some of the companies that are here so that they get a better idea that no, there really is a future for them here in Maine.
It seems successful. Looked like there were, a goodly number of students and participants from both the academic and the industry sectors. Sort of want to throw it up to the other panelists now. When you think about the life sciences or biomedical science economy in Maine, what's important to you? We can see that it's growing in some ways. At MDI Biological Laboratory, have been growing over the last decade fairly significantly. The Roux Institute has put down a big marker in Portland worth $100 million more for developing research education from that position. The university is expanding some of its programs. So what should we be talking about when we talk about the bioscience economy? Aileen or Jim?
Well, I'll jump in just real quick. I think that, from the perspective of the Maine INBRE, and it's just to connect with what Billie was just saying, we've done a really good job of training undergraduates and getting them engaged in biomedical research, and very often they're coming from backgrounds where they didn't even think it was a possibility. We've got colleges where we have first generation students and so forth, and they get into one of our short courses, get interested in it, had never thought about it before, then do a fellowship in a lab. And then in some cases they'll stay in Maine, and we have several of those folks working here at MDIBL and a bunch of folks at Jack's, but very often they end up leaving the state, going to Boston or whatever. So I'm actually heartened to hear what BioME is doing and all these companies. And I think one of the challenges is making that connection of the students who are getting engaged in the research at the colleges and the research institutes, and getting them connected to the opportunities and finding those opportunities. And then one other thing I'd just like to say, I see a big growth area, and this is something we're going to be focusing on in our next cycle, is in what's being referred to as data science. So data science is kind of an umbrella term. It's a buzzword that's being thrown out now, but it refers to computer science, biostatistics, bioinformatics. And what's happening now in the biological sciences is we're really having an explosion of data. When I was training as a graduate student, we were limited by the amount of data we had. So you went out and you worked at the bench and did experiments to get data. But now it's a very different world. We're not limited by the amount of data. We're limited by the ability to analyze the data and to use that information in an effective way, and to interpret it and comprehend it. And so I think, students who are coming up who are able to get trained and get the expertise for dealing with these data are going to be really empowered to do things. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities in companies and in academia for that kind of knowledge and expertise.
Aileen,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I could just imagine, having spoken to Aileen Huang-Saad and you, Jim, before on this issue, that you might agree with that, Aileen.
Absolutely. I mean, I think he's spot on. The Roux Institute also, when they began, we basically made bets on two different areas to really work hard in advancing. One is in the area of data and computation, and the other is in terms of life sciences. So the synergies are great with what Jim's talking about in the INBRE. And then I think when we think about the programs that we're doing here, we think about foundationally, what is it that our community in Maine needs to sort of upskill in if we're going to advance in this more innovation economy. And I think foundationally that is data science as well as computation. And then what we do is we put them contextually. And so the contextual pieces are, we're looking at them in terms of life sciences and bioinformatics, precision medicine, all of these things that we can really advance to try and impact the entire economy. I think the other thing that we think about in our team is really thinking about the overall pipeline in order to push our community into more of the innovation economy around the life sciences, because when you think about ecosystem and development, you need people at all levels. I mean, Billie was talking about it. One thing that we want everyone to understand is life sciences is for all. And what we want to do is we partner with individuals around the state to say, look, there are different on-ramps into this community. You don't have to be just one, right? So there are a lot of times I've talked to people in the community that said, one of the challenges we have is this narrow pipeline that a lot of the students that study the life sciences tend to be the ones that might be in the more advanced classes and go on to an elite college and then may not return. But the reality is there's opportunities at all levels, and we want to engage people at those levels. And so we've been really working hard to work with the community colleges, the universities, so that we can actually work in tandem with people as opposed to be contrary to what they're doing, right? Because there's the density of our state compared to others may not be as dense, but that means that we have a lot of opportunities. And what we should do is avoid being duplicative and actually work in tandem.
So since I've been in this field now for half a year roughly, I've detected a hunger for collaboration and for kind of mutual effort towards funding, towards education, towards creative science. What are you guys experiencing? Do you see that happening? And could it really counterbalance like the magnet that is Boston or other highly resourced bioscience states?
So I'll take this only because science and engineering, those are team sports, right? I mean, the amount of information that's being generated in these fields are immense. And so it's so hard to just expect one organization to necessarily advance everything, right? And so that's the beauty of what I like about science. And we're just naturally sort of collaborative, right? So it's in our foundation and our ability to work across. So that's the really exciting piece in Maine is we have that opportunity to do that. And so at least, I mean, I know we've been working very hard to collaborate with INBRE. We're working on grants. INBRE has an amazing network, so there's no need for us to duplicate the network that they have here. We've been connecting a lot with the industry within the state because there are different pathways for our students in life sciences. We need the innovators that are going to go on to do research, pursue doctoral programs. We also need the students that are more interested on the business side of advancing life sciences. We need the ones that want to be on the testing side, the quality side. So I think we've really created an ecosystem that we're well connected. We understand where the strengths are, and we can navigate and help our students through those paths.
I want to echo what Aileen is saying too. The kind of one of Maine's biggest assets is the easy access to resources, government officials, entrepreneurial support, the feeling that everyone knows everyone, and somebody is just a phone call away, and there's just not the cutthroat atmosphere, is really an asset to Maine. And here you can be a big fish in a small pond rather than a small fish in a big pond. So,
and do you think that actually translated to being a competitive advantage when it comes to foundation funding, federal NIH or National Science Foundation funding, or venture funding? Is that like actually sort of a selling point that we can use? I know there are some federal funds that are specifically directed at rural states and at sort of the outside of the usual beltway states, but are you seeing that these funders are responsive to the position we're in now in some way?
I would think so, especially for startups. Startups have access to money in various different fashions in our state.
Yeah, I think a challenge for Maine historically has been geography. We're spread around. And so, one advantage of a competitive advantage of a place like Boston or, the high density of biomedical researchers is they're right there next to each other and they can get together and talk. but that's becoming less of an issue now. And one of the things that we've discovered, especially with the COVID pandemic, is you don't have to be in the same institution or in the same building or across the street from one another to get together and talk. And maybe Zoom isn't quite the same as being in the coffee room and having a conversation, but it's pretty good. And so I think, the activation energy that we have to overcome to be a very highly collaborative state, you can think of the whole state as of being kind of like Boston. We have the necessary talent and it's just spread around. And so the key to overcoming that is just having communication barriers lowered, and we're doing that. And so, and not only having communication barriers lowered, but having people across the state know each other and know who is doing what and what their talents are. So if you have a problem that you need to solve, you can just pick up the phone and talk to somebody at the Roux Institute and say, I have this idea, and then you can start working on it, even though you're 4 hours drive apart. We have the technology now that's not really a problem.
So as we sort of think about how we want to grow this and how excited all the people in this Zoom probably are around this sector, we are seeing some signs of a slowdown in various parts of the country. There have been stories in the Boston Globe about sort of a quieter time for venture capital and for highly competitive startups coming along. We've seen recently layoffs at the Abbott Labs in Westbrook in Maine, as the sort of jobs that were created to service pandemic needs have become less in demand. I'm curious about when we promote this sector to Maine students, and are we at any risk of that there won't be the jobs there when they come out the other end of the pipeline? Like, what do we know about that for 5 or 10 years from now? What, as we really try to engage students in doing science and being part of this wonderful world, what there'll be for them on the other end of that. Jim?
Well, I'd kind of turn that around, Fred, because I think the big elephant in the room right now for all this is uncertainty. And so you can't predict, and there's a lot of uncertainty that comes from just the environmental changes that's happening with climate change and everything else, but also with technological evolution and development. I mean, the amount of change that's happening right now in technology is kind of overwhelming. It's still exponential. So I would be really hesitant to predict what it's going to be like 2 years from now, 5 years from now, except to say, I do predict that this incredible change that's happening, both change for the good and change for the possibly not so good, with climate change and so forth, it's increasing the amount of uncertainty we have, but that's also means there's going to be opportunities for people who are prepared to take advantage of those opportunities. So what we need to be thinking about is how to prepare people to see opportunity when it arises and how to be able to deal with that. I'm not sure, how to do that, but I'm pretty confident that that's what we need to do. And thinking scientifically is one way to do that. Having a good grasp of mathematics, statistics is fundamentally important for being able to take advantage of those kinds of opportunities.
And maybe having an entrepreneur's attitude is also part of it, and they often go together.
Absolutely.
Scientific and entrepreneurial. And we're seeing more programs, for instance, at Colby, but not just there, also on our campus and elsewhere, that are kind of trying to boost interest and education around entrepreneurialism. Aileen, I don't know what Roux might be doing around that as well, but I'm sure it is. I just wanted to let everyone who's participating, who's part of this Zoom, to feel free to pipe up, to write a question in the chat, to raise your hand any way that you might want to get involved. Please do. We're about a half an hour into the hour that we have, so please feel free to engage.
Can I add something to
please, of course,
what
Billie.
Jim was saying? So while the layoffs definitely have happened, and it does seem like there could be a slowdown in the job growth that was caused by the pandemic. Maine's life sciences industry is not just about COVID diagnostics.
Mm.
We have employers who do things completely unrelated to COVID. And the Boston area life sciences industry is heavily rooted in biopharma, whereas Maine's industry is very different, and ranges from animal health and pet health to biomedical research and human diagnostics, sector breakdowns that look very different from Boston's. So while some of Boston's may be cooling off, we have the potential to keep growing as well. And if you look back at the trends from 5-10 years ago, there was already steady job growth prior to the pandemic in the life sciences sector. So we're pretty confident that it's going to keep growing.
That is certainly good to hear, and reassuring. Do you think that the curricula, so where are there gaps, like in terms of a match between curriculum and need, or between jobs and curricula, or in the communications for collaboration? Where do we need to do better, if you've identified any such things?
So I can address a little bit of this. I think when we've been talking to a lot of the companies here, one of the major gaps that we've identified is because the life sciences is relatively new to some communities as a field of study, if they hadn't sort of been prepared for it the whole time, they're joining this space with very little understanding of the foundations that you might get in your high school program or your undergraduate if you had always been studying life sciences. So a lot of the companies have been talking to us about just the need to even expose them to the basic principles and the understanding of scientific analysis and problem solving. And so if we recognize the fact that our workforce into the life sciences industry is not always a single pipeline coming from K through 12, but it could be adult learners changing different industries, we have to be able to find ways to engage them and help them be able to come into these industries with an understanding of the vocabulary, the basic principles, the mindset, and things of that sort. That's one of the gaps that I've seen since we've talked to many of the companies.
Are you starting to work on it at Roux? Is there programmatically,
Absolutely.
you're thinking about it?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that the Roux has really been working a lot on is what we called customized learning, where we've been working with individual companies and industries in order to make sure that we're meeting the needs of their workforce development. We think about workforce development in terms of attracting, retaining, and promoting within institutions. So recognizing the fact that Maine has a decreasing population and it tends to be an older population, we absolutely have to be creating opportunities that will want to draw new talent, but we also have to come up with ways to promote and retain the individuals that are actually here as well. So we think about all of those different pieces.
I'd like to try to bring in Basant Parody, who is a recruiter, chief of recruitment, I believe, at IDEX. Basant, I think you wanted to join here. What's going on?
I did. I think this is a great panel, by the way, and thank you. And I'm listening to what you guys are saying, and I really wanted to pipe in on gap, right? So let me just take a minute to introduce myself. I am the Senior Talent Acquisition Specialist that supports research and development at IDEX. So I'm in the innovation space. What I'm seeing, I think Jim talked about data scientists and being able to analyze and interpret data. That's definitely like a huge thing that's coming down the pipeline, especially for IDEX. Like that's a big need that we have. We have a department that just does data analysis. As far as Aileen talked about gaps in lab skills, and that's absolutely something that we're seeing, especially as people are graduating post-pandemic, post-COVID. A lot of what I am seeing is that I'm seeing students coming out of degree programs where they don't have lab skills. They don't know how to pipette. They don't know how to, run like a gel phoresis. They don't have that hands-on in the lab. While Jim said, a lot of what we can do, it can be remote, but there are certain types of sciences that have to be, in-person, hands-on science. And we cherish that, but we don't always have the bandwidth to be able to train that when we get a new, fresh college graduate. I think that Jim also hit on a really good point. One of our challenges as a big employer in the biosciences is geography. I have challenges getting people to move to Maine, but here's the challenge is that I'm not seeing a lot of people coming out of these programs that are already here that can fit our need. Like that's a huge gap that I see can be filled in that, a lot of what we do in our diagnostics space is biomarker discovery. It's one of my biggest challenges to be able to find that talent, that very specific talent. People from Boston, they're all in Boston, but people from Boston don't want to move to Portland. So that really is like a big challenge for us, but it is definitely a very highly collaborative and innovative space that we work in. And then the other thing I wanted to kind of address here too is, I think Fred asked the question about slowdowns and layoffs and that kind of thing. And we're seeing it. I think we're all seeing it, but it's not, okay, it's not the best scenario for somebody coming out of school. However, it's one of those things where IDEX brought in 72 scientists and engineers in research and development last year. So that's huge. That's a huge growth for us. And so we're just we're hanging out for a little bit this year to see, do we really need any more talent right now? And that's what we're doing. We've been on this hire, and now we're just kind of like, okay, let's get everybody in, let's get everybody trained, and let's see where our true gaps are. So,
Basan, I just want to follow up with one question. When you mentioned, when you were talking about biomarkers, for instance, did you mean to say that like there aren't enough students coming out of Maine who are trained in that particular area? And do you think that there should be some sort of a direct match between the educational institutions here and what it is that IDEX needs?
I think so. I think that's a huge gap. The biggest thing for us is, that's a huge thing because that's where all of our innovation starts. And when you're looking at diagnostics, that's where all the innovation starts, is you got to find the biomarker, then you got to create whatever test platform it's going to hold. That's going to hold the biomarker and how it's going to be detected. So all of our innovation in the diagnostics world starts with the biomarker discovery space. So yeah, that's a huge, I mean, I had to travel, last year I had 3 openings, and I couldn't find anybody local. I did have to go out of state to find the talent that I needed. So yeah, that's definitely a huge gap.
Jerry Bowers, I think you wanted to join in the conversation here.
Well, it's just, thanks, Fred. And this is just a great conversation and one that I'm just incredibly passionate about. So Basan, I really appreciate your comments. It's really helpful for us. I know I've been working with Jim and Chris and others here at the MDI Biological Lab with this INBRE network. And so we've often felt like, we have this great program. We've trained nearly 3,000 Maine undergraduates through it, but how do we sort of, bridge that gap? How do we get that word out to employers like IDEX and others who are looking for that very specific skill set? And I just can't help but think part of this is a communication issue, right? Somehow we're not connecting those dots. And I'd love to, just dig into that at some point, because I think it's such a crucial issue.
Jerry, I am more than happy to connect offline, and that's to anybody on the call, more than happy to connect offline and really dive a little deeper into how we can collaborate a little bit better to fill those gaps.
That would be great. I would like to talk with you. I can say that I think part of that might be, we are at the INBRE, for example, is a network of academic institutions. And we're led by MDIBL is a basic research institution, and the kinds of questions that are addressed in academic research labs are different than the kinds of questions that are addressed in a biotech company or biomarkers. I mean, that's something I think our students would probably understand that, but it's what you're looking for is a very specialized thing. Where we're maybe training more generalists for our academic kind of orientation. That's not necessarily what we need to be doing only, but, so it would be good to have a conversation about what those kinds of gaps are and what we could be doing to help.
Yeah, absolutely. I am more than happy to have those conversations. Yeah. And just as a, just so you get, I've only been with IDEX for 1.5 years. So I'm kind of new to sort of new to this network, if you will. So, but I'm seeing lots of gaps.
Well, it seems like a pretty basic question to me, and a really fascinating one is we need the basic science. I mean, particularly MDI Biological, we're dedicated to that. But we're also dedicated to education, and we want people to have a reason to get, many people will they love the science for what it is, and they just love doing it, and they want to keep on doing it, and they can pursue it, through an academic career. But others want to be applied, and they need the basics. But how do we, where is it okay to adapt to training needs? And maybe SMCC is really great at that, and others are better at the academic track. I don't know, but it sounds like we need more. I don't want to use the word tracking, but more direction, more demonstration of directions that you can take that produce work in the sort of near term.
Right. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, I think about it as pathways, right? So making sure students understand that there are pathways from that high school graduate that may be very content working in a lab as an operator to the one that realizes after they've been an operator, they want to keep progressing and maybe go on to get their associates onto undergrad, from undergrad becomes inspired by INBRE, wants to, go on to do their doctorate. Someone else says, oh, I'm really inspired by, understanding the business principles, might come to the Roux to do a bioenterprise certificate, all of these pieces to make sure that the students understand that there's a place to go within Maine. And I think that's the other thing, to try and make sure our students understand. I can't tell you how many times students have come to us and been like, I'm so glad that we have this opportunity to continue our education in the state of Maine, because for a while I thought that I would have to leave in order to get this type of education, right? And so that's one of the hardest things for people to understand. And I think Jim alluded to this earlier, is that with technology changing at the rate in which it is, the jobs and the ideas and the problems that people are solving and working on today are drastically different than 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and we couldn't even have predicted what those things are. Yeah. Our job, I think, is to make sure that we're teaching students how to be adaptive learners so that they can address the problems that have yet to come. And that's really where we're going to do the most for the future, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I also want to chime in and just say, just put a plug in real quick, that BioMaine does give grants and scholarships as well for life sciences students to Maine institutions. So if you know any students that are looking to pursue or further their life sciences career and just need a little bit of a boost, financial boost, send them to us.
And Billie, I just want to jump in and say, how much I appreciate BioMaine's efforts, because I think, Aileen and I and others, Jim certainly, have talked for years about this sort of perception issue that we have in Maine, this idea that, you can't really stay here and have a career either in life sciences or in the in the tech industry or whatever. And what we're seeing is that's really no longer true. And I love the fact that you all are reaching out kind of at the elementary school level and other places and really trying to, shine a spotlight on the fact that there are plenty of opportunities here in Maine. And in fact, they're great opportunities. And I think maybe one message that I'm taking away from some of the comments here today in our work at the MDI Bio Lab is to really stress Aileen's point about there are jobs for everyone here, right? These are organizations that need every level of support. So, you don't necessarily have to be a straight A student in biology, right? I mean, there can be a lot of other skills and a lot of other ways to be part of this sector, part of this industry. So that's an important message as well, I think, that we need to get out there.
I'd really like to encourage all of our participants who have not piped up yet to do so. If you've got anything on your mind when you're speaking with these educators and scientists about what your point of view is, how the situation looks from where you sit, it would certainly be great. What have we not covered here that we need to think about when we're looking to a robust future for the sciences and a bioscience economy in the state?
That's a really good question. Can I, while we think about that one, can I pose another question to your audience?
Of course.
And that is, for everyone that's tuned in today, why did you tune in today? And what would you see as a win for having spent this time listening to our conversation? And if you could drop that in the chat, that would be really great as well. So.
Or unmute yourself and jump right in.
Absolutely.
As well. Yeah.
And then while they're thinking about that, Fred, can you repeat your question so that we can?
Well, it's very similar. It's actually your formulation is pretty similar. Just looking to elicit what it is that interests people here. What do they want to know about? I think Philippe, did you want to make a comment?
Yes. Thank you very much. I don't have any scientific background. I'm a former CEO and founder of some biotech. I've been working all my career in biotech and pharma, big pharma and small company, and just wanted to introduce some business perspective because I've been working with small startup companies in California and Boston, as well as in North Carolina, and I tried to understand why some states were so successful versus some others. And I think that in addition to the traditional criteria, the quality of the university and so on, I identified two factors, which for me are absolutely important. The first one is the importance of success stories among the alumni. People that, are gonna be driving, the trend, bring investors, bring, angel investors, and you have names, that are so important. I saw that in California, didn't see that, in North Carolina, with a few exceptions. The second element is the more serendipity. I noticed that you could be in the Bay Area or in Boston, you sit in any Starbucks coffee. After 2 minutes, somebody's going to ask you, which kind of business are you working for? And you engage and immediately you exchange. ideas, contacts, connections, and so on. In North Carolina, even, very close to Chapel Hill, Duke, or UNCW, that was not the case. So for me, just wanted to introduce that, the importance of these two factors to create a little bit of a beginning of a startup array. Don't know if you see what I mean.
Oh, so I think that you are hitting on many of the things that resonate with at least the launch of the Roux Institute. So the Roux Institute has long believed that entrepreneurship is a critical piece in order to stimulate these types of conversations. And we have a very active entrepreneurship group that has been trying to do exactly that, to bring this culture to just inspire people to want to be change agents and create change. I think the other thing that we've been doing is thinking sort of the idea of collisions of what you've been talking about. I think one of the things that when we think about the Bay Area or Cambridge, we think about the high density. And so if you think about just molecules in a box, the more molecules you have a lot of collisions, right? So what do you do when you have a lower density population like in a more dispersed population like we have in Maine? And I think, one question people is like, oh, well, we can't do it because we just don't have that density. I think when you think about a network has two components, right? You've got the nodes and you've got the connections. And if you don't have the number of nodes to have random collisions, what you do is you tweak the other piece and you create what we've been referring to as an intentional network, which is really reinforcing those connections between each of these organizations, which is what you've heard a lot of on this call today, is that the BioME has been a huge sort of catalyst in creating this network around the state, along with INBRE. You can see the way INBRE has really integrated itself across all of the higher education institutions. And as the Roux come in, we've also been trying to make sure that we're working very much in concert with these organizations. And I think we are now at this critical point in the state where we are able to, I think you'll see us overcoming the challenge of not having those incidental collisions, because we're going to have very intentional ones.
Jim, did you want to add to that?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that brings up a really important point about part of this whole project is developing the culture. And that's one of the goals of the Maine INBRE, is to develop it's always been to develop a research culture, but you can add to that an entrepreneurial culture where and that the key element of that kind of culture is a collaborative mindset. So being open to collaborating with other folks, not just wanting to hoard your ideas, but if you have an idea, talking to other folks about it. And then a big part of that is knowing who is there to talk about. So that's one of our big goals, is to get people to know who else is in the network and make it an intentional network. To lower that activation energy. So if you have a good idea, you know who to call, at what institution, and talk about it and make that as easy as possible. And
convenings are part of the picture too. And MDI Biological Laboratory is having its 50th annual biomedical symposium this spring. Do you see more opportunities like that arising in the state?
Yeah, it's already happening. So we've had the Maine Biological and Medical Sciences Symposium. Will be our 50th this April. Happens every year, and we have students and faculty from all around the state come to that. But it's already grown past that, and so the University of Maine Institute of Medicine has got their own that they've organized with MDIBL and Roux and the Jackson Lab and Maine Health. The first one was in Portland last October. Was a big success, and there's going to be another one this coming October. And there's room for more of that, and it's growing. People are getting to know one another, and I see this network really developing into a collaborative network over the next few years.
Philippe, I'm curious, are you here in Maine? Are you starting up any companies here now? What brought you to this forum?
Actually, I've been introduced by your president. He's a connection, of some friend of mine, and was interested to know what was done at this lab. and but I'm residing in North Carolina. That's where I am today, but I've been working all across the place.
I wonder if one of the advantages we might have here is Maine itself. At that conference that the university put together, I talked with John Lorsch a little bit, who directs the National Institutes of General Medical Sciences, which is the NIH arm that funds a lot of infrastructure and resources for MDI Biological Lab and many others. And he said, look, you guys are doing okay here. There is something happening here. You could learn from West Virginia. I think he mentioned a couple of other states. But one thing you've got is the environment, the beauty of Maine, and its natural magnetism as actually something that in this sector we should try to sell to attract the talent here, to attract the students here, to attract the investors here. I'm curious, I mean, at MDI, we have lots of beauty. It can be hard to get people to come all the way up to an island off at the tip of the country. You know, Aileen, Billie, Jim, do you see like Maine's, you know, resource-based history, its legacy, and its natural beauty as something that can help us in this?
I think so. I mean, it's not necessarily for everyone, but certainly one of the big reasons I stuck around came here in the first place and don't really want to leave. And I know there are a lot of other folks like that as well. It's a huge attractor.
Aileen, you're in Portland. When you're, if you have students who are sort of coming from the Northeastern firmament, and they're wondering about coming all the way up to Maine, is it an issue for any of them, or one way or another?
It's interesting. I think people are motivated by different reasons, right? And I think what we need to do is we need to be able to really hit on the right motivations. It could be a little bit biased, but I think scientists really enjoy being around an interesting problem to solve. So what I'm sort of hoping over the next 5 to 10 years that you're going to see here within the state of Maine is, because of our deliberate approach to really bringing scientists together, particularly across the different industries, from what you might see as more traditional biology or biopharma, but where we might be able to sort of work collaboratively with some of the more heritage industries that we have such a depth of knowledge in, that we might be able to create new core competencies that are going to draw people here because they want to work in tandem with the work already going on here. So this is an amazing place to live. I feel so fortunate to be here. But I want that to be one piece of the fabric on why people come, right? I think we've talked about so many things about this community that has to offer that many people may not know, right? I mean, the collaborative nature that we have here is not known to other people, but once they realize how much you can accomplish, I think I talk to a lot of people about the fact that I come from an area that's sort of the Ann Arbor, Michigan area is really 19 schools and colleges that are all very separate, but they all sit under the brand of University of Michigan. I think we have the exact same talent in the state, but we just may not all sit in the same city. So if we can learn to really activate all of those things, I think, have the opportunity to really push the boundary on some innovations that other states and areas don't have, and hoping that that's going to draw more individuals to want to come and work with us.
Very quickly, I'll just ask Billie, is that a selling point for you and the association?
Well, yeah. So I want to add that, yes, Maine is billed as vacation land, and that may bring people such as undergraduate students to the state. And that's wonderful. And so once they fall in love with that piece, BioME's goal is to show them that they can stay here. So they may be brought here by the environment, by how wonderful Maine is. And we just want to be able to show them that, once you do your undergraduate, there are opportunities for you to be able to stay and live your life here as well.
Maybe Fred, I want to add, again, drawing from my experience in North Carolina, Wilmington is very similar to Maine. It's a beautiful area, everything. And when I was CFO for PPD, the CRO company, headquartered in Wilmington, we had problem to bring people, in the bio activities. And the two reasons where we had so much difficulty, why we had so much difficulty, which are still, today, two reasons. The fact that first, you need to be able to provide a job for the spouse. Because, the researcher may be ready to come. If his spouse doesn't have a job, that's an issue. The second element is also the researchers. I noticed when I talked with them at the PPD, they want to continue to learn. They want to be in an environment where they are going to continue to learn, not just in their job, but around their job. And that was one of the issues in Wilmington, North Carolina.
You're muted, Fred.
I think we all have things to offer in that direction. As Aileen was pointing out before, maybe we need to elevate them more, make them more prominent, our collaborative abilities, the colleagues and research and knowledge gaining opportunities that there still are in the state outside of any given institution. I should wrap up now. I do have a lot more questions for all of you. I want to thank everyone for participating. Aileen Huang-Saad of the Roux Institute, Billie, Cary of the Bioscience Association of Maine, and Jim Coffman of our own MDI Bio Lab. Thanks to everyone else who participated. I want to mention that all our science cafes are free to enjoy, and they're open to the public to the generosity of our donors. And if you want to support these kinds of events, you can go to our website, MDIBL.org/support. Our next Science Cafe is on Monday, March 13th at 5 o'clock. The subject is related to this one. It's the importance of mentoring in STEM education. We'll hear from a postdoc at the lab, Emily Spalding, who's doing some terrific work. She's the 2022 winner of the NIH's Outstanding Scholars in Neuroscience Award, been doing some great publications. And then the month after that, and that's on the 13th, I believe. Did I say that? Yes, the 13th, Monday at 5 p.m. In April, we'll have Andy Rivkin with us, who is a former New York Times climate reporter, kind of invented that beat for them. He's recently moved to Maine. He runs a climate communications and science communications initiative at Columbia University. And his topic will be, how do you do science communications in an online environment that's pretty polluted? And he'll be joined by one of our own teachers here, former postdoc who now teaches at Hudson College, Elizabeth Marnick. And so that'll be in April, and that should be really great too. So thanks to everyone. I think hopefully we can have a message about how to sign up for our e-news. But please, if you want to keep up to date, just come to our website, and you'll probably get an email from us asking you if you want to be able to participate in and get emails from us saying what we're up to, what our science cafes are, what our latest science is. Maybe even some job opportunities will be posted there too. So thanks again, and stay in touch. Really appreciate you.